As soon as I get hip to something and I'm like really I have a process, and then I'm like, oh wait, I see somebody else using something that's, you know, it's a never-ending cycle of learning new things and trying to better your craft.
That's exactly right. That's the whole point of the thing, isn't it?
Yes, and trying to better yourself and follow your passion. So this is exciting for me because I've been hip to you a little bit. I've been following you obviously through socials, and I really want to get into the one thing that grabbed my attention from the very beginning was the farming, urban farming, and Deca. And I don't know a lot about it, but following you and watching you, it's like, oh, this is really interesting, and I would like to learn more. Because me personally, not so much the farming, but like planting things and watching them grow and trying to be one with nature and earth. And, you know, I've been trying for the last couple of years myself to kind of get into that, you know, keeping things alive, like plants and stuff, like learning and putting your feet in the grass and that type of stuff.
All of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole wellness aspect.
Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of levels to it. So talk to me about it. Let's start with Deca. Let's start there because we both received the fund through a Laxer Equity Fund. And I'm curious to hear from you, like where did this passion for farming start?
Okay, that's a great question, Felix. First of all, thanks so much for having me on here.
Absolutely.
And also, again, double shout out to Lancaster Equity Council for giving both of us the opportunity to sort of progress and come closer to fulfilling our dreams. So thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
But I think when we talk about how Deca started, it really, I'm going to give you a little bit more context than that.
Please.
Because my passion has become farming, but it really wasn't that at all. So how Deca started was actually through a program called Create Karma. This was a leadership and yoga teacher training run by Sarah Yuki at the time.
Okay.
And so much of the leadership aspect was learning, because that's something I think you learn, especially as somebody who is, you know, seeking something, learning that you have a community and it's vast and it's broad, and like, how do you connect to your community? Who do you feel connected to? And who do you think could connect to you as well? So, you know, that being a big aspect of how we were learning the principles of yoga, the principles of like understanding ourselves and filling up our own cups so we could help others.
Yeah.
And so, you know, long story short, a whole lot of that kind of action, a whole lot of self-inquiry turned into, I'll give you the long story since we're here.
Yeah, please. I love it.
So it turned into actually me getting to reconnect with my estranged father after 20, almost 30 some years.
Wow.
And so through this reconnection, again, and after all the self-inquiry, instead of being so mad at him for not being in my life and like missing out on all the things that I thought I was missing out on, all I wanted from him was to like him to give me something, right?
Yeah.
Give me something back that I have been missing all this time. But like I said, through all this self-refinement and learning about who I am and what moves me, I decided instead to see what I could do for him. And that really changed like my whole outlook. Instead of trying to squeeze something out of him, like what can I actually give? And so, through this reconnection, it was a program called Landmark that me and some of my colleagues completed. It's like a personal and career development course. I was able to reconnect with my dad, and, he was venting to me about life and stuff. And he said, I learned that we have a farm still in Liberia that where my grandfather and my grandmother is buried, my great grandfather too. And so this is a long one. So basically, he was like, we have this farm and it's going to shit. Can somebody please help me? Right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I live in Lancaster. We have the best soil. I know a lot of farmers. I'm sure I could find someone to help you. And it turned out we had a couple meetings with a couple of local, longtime heritage farmers here. And we talked a lot of ideas and it was great. But I realized that I'm going to be the one to go do it if it needs to be done. So, we got the family together. Everybody in Liberia is on a WhatsApp, together. So I'm reconnecting with my family. I'm learning all this stuff. And I said, all right, well, if I can learn how to farm and learn, sort of the ecology of Liberia, maybe I can help my family now that I'm reconnecting with them and sort of give back all the stuff, that I thought I was missing or lacking. So my first attempt was to intern at my friends' farms, and I realized, well, I don't have a car, so that's going to be an issue. And then another friend was like, well, my neighbors are sort of maybe not so friendly towards Black folks, so maybe don't come learn at our farm. And I said, heard and thank you.
Yeah.
But also that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Was that a surprise?
No.
Right.
But, at the time, I'll say no. I live in those areas now,
sure.
and it's really not as bad as it, the assumption. So.
Okay, gotcha.
So anyway, I was running into all these barriers, and I realized that if I'm going to do it, I need to do it here. If I'm going to learn how to farm, I need to do it right where I am. And that was Lancaster City. So, deciding or realizing, well, how am I going to do this? What is it called? How do I learn how to farm when I don't have anything? And that's how really Deca was born.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, this is one of the things that I love about when I'm meeting new people and I'm learning about their journey is obviously it's human nature to, when you learn that someone's doing something, you kind of have this preconceived notion of how they came about it. And then it's just wow, this was completely different. So one of the things that I appreciated was the rekindling with your estranged father. And what was it, if you don't mind me asking, what were some of the things that you were at first wanting from him?
Sure. Well, that's a good question. And I think anybody that's grown up without a parent or without a father, particularly, because these words tend to come from dad, are, I'm proud of you. Mm-hmm. You're doing a really good job. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as I grew and, became more aware of how the world works, I started to understand and see my parents as just regular people.
Yeah.
Just regular people trying to make decisions about their lives. And so, that helped to take a lot of the hurt out of it and just see it as people making choices and not so much a personal, slight.
That's a lot of, it takes a lot of growth though. That's where I always feel like, and this comes up often in the podcast too, where it's if you can get to that point in life, you have to tip your hat to yourself, which is hard for some people, like myself.
Yeah.
I can't compliment myself, but it's the pat on the back. I totally get it when you start to look at your parents as regular people because they are. And it's almost like, all right, well, I probably made some bonehead choices in my life as a parent, and I'm who am I? But it's not easy to get to that point because it's very understandable, and it's you're validated to feel a sense of you owe me as a child that's longing for the relationship with their parent, in your case, your father. I had that same experience with my father, where it was kind of like, I feel like there's a lot of things I never got from you. And unfortunately, I won't be able to have that now because my father passed.
I'm sorry to hear
But thank you. But I appreciate that, because it looks like, from what you're telling me, that really opened the door to something that you weren't, prior to that, even thinking about farming at all.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll admit I have a little bit of a prepper in me. And so, I'm like seeing these things, and again, just trying to figure out, like, I'm a crafty individual. My mom was too. Like, if we didn't have a hammer, we used a heel. Like,
gotcha.
That's just how we do. So, it was like, well, these are the things I want to do. What do I need to do to make it happen? And again, through, like, I think, just in a little bit of an aside, I think a lot of us are sort of like over like development programs and coaching things, like, as a society. I think we're a little bit over it, but I really highly suggest it, because it really gave me access to things and ways of thinking and frameworks that I really wouldn't have had. And so how Deca, again, was inspired was through an exercise I did with a pen and paper. And I used like a scene wave, like, what are my hobbies and what am I good at and what's the middle? And that's how I sort of figured out aquaponics, hydroponics, farming, service to my community, divinity, movement, dance, yoga, like all these things are now Discerning Eye brand.
Okay. Yeah, Discerning Eye. I believe that's where Deca is, the Discerning Eye Community Agriculture.
That's right. Previously, Discerning Eye Center for the Arts.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple of things there that you mentioned yoga, which doing some research, I got hip that yoga is a part of your life as well.
Absolutely.
So did that come later, or was that always part of your life prior to the farming?
Oh no, it was 2016 with that class, Create Karma. I actually took it as a leadership course, not realizing there was so much yoga in it. Like, I really thought yoga was just going to be like the little part of it. And then when we came in and everybody's like in there, I got my first pair of spandex like that weekend. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I was really not hip to it at all. I think I had taken one class previously. Okay. And it was like a yoga nidra class, so mostly what we did was sleep, So like, yeah, yoga was totally new. And it was very hard for me in the beginning. And the first class, actually, I was surrounded by middle-aged white women, and I just was like, what the heck am I doing here? Yeah. I had been working at the time as a director at the Boys and Girls Club on the Jack Walker Clubhouse. Okay. And so, I was pretty much entrenched in one community and then about to be a part of another, and where I really felt like I didn't belong. And so the saving grace, though, was the first day's instructor. His name is Jean-Jacques Gabriel. And he's a Black man, African-American man. Actually, I think he's Haitian-American. Okay. And he's in Philly. And all he did was put a hand on my shoulder and say, "You good?" And I was like, like, yeah, I can do this. Just get me a little bit of connection, and then I can plug in here. But otherwise, I felt untethered. So yoga was not something I'd always done, or even really something I was really into until it started to work. I kind of feel like, and obviously I'm an outsider looking in, but it's the yoga and the farming where it's almost like,
when this expedition and journey started in your life, were you noticing anything like, and again, outsider looking in, people of color with yoga and people of color with farming, you don't really hear a lot of it. And that's not to say that they're not out there. So when you have these experiences, like you just said, what am I doing here? How do you, where do you find that center where you're like, I'm good. I'm gonna make this, because that can turn people off, where it's just like, I can't do this right now.
Wow. So that's a really great question. Are you asking me like, what made me stay? What made me?
I guess,
stick
yeah.
with
Like,
it?
how did you
Where
find
was my will?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Well, I think I'm just a Capricorn, and I am like, I can't quit. so like quitting's not an option. I'm sure that was also based on how I was raised, you know. But yeah, quitting's not really an option. So doing it and seeing it through, and really, I think I'm already sort of imbued with a sense of patience. So sticking with it isn't a difficult thing for me.
Okay.
But I can see how for a lot of people, it's just like, I feel uncomfortable, I'm leaving. And that's totally valid. But, you know, if you're able to stretch that boundary just a little bit, and that's what I teach in yin yoga, which is my sort of specialty or whatever, as opposed to yang, which is a little more power, big muscle.
What's yin? What?
So yin is the sort of feminine archetype to yang, right? Or yang. And yeah, so it's the reception. It's watery. It's like all these sort of archetypal things, not particularly like woman, but archetypally feminine aspects of the body or a movement. But, you know, in practice, it is mostly longer held poses. So, you know, when you're in a long pose, your mind is going. Even if you're just sitting for a long time, you're like, oh my God, why am I sitting like, or, oh, my body's going to break, or
right.
Does this teacher even know we're still here? Like, what is going on? And so my goal as the guide of the class is to remind you to connect with your breath, to sort of engage that thing that says, I have a choice here, and I'm making the choice to control my body, control my breath, and control my mind, so that I can do the things I want to do and not be sort of dissuaded by sensation.
Okay. I appreciate that. I just noticed as you were talking, the yin and the yang, then it made sense to me. I was like, yeah. But, you mentioned water a couple times. Is there, what's the significance and the importance of water with yoga, obviously with farming, but there's a lot more to it, I'm sure, with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one thing about me, you'll learn, I love stories. I love mythologies. I love the idea of archetypes. I'm a big time nerd. So like,
no, it's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
I'm
right there with you.
So, the archetype of water is, I love to say, you know, it's as soothing as like a spring shower, but also as powerful as the water that can carve the Grand Canyon. You know, like water has, it has so much, it's everything, you know, it's nourishment and it's power and its destruction. And so, you know, in noticing all of these archetypes, in all of these qualities of the thing, they're not all bad and they're not all good, but you learn to work with them. And so I think that's what's been fun about using the archetypes of water in my body and my mind, and then also with my hands, you know, bringing water to crops, using hydroponics, using aquaponics.
What's the difference between the two there? I just heard two different names.
So both of those ponics are growing without soil. Hydroponics is basically a more general description of soilless media, farming without soil.
Gotcha.
And then aquaponics has the inclusion of fish or aquaculture in order to grow some food.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's really, really fun.
Well, yeah, I would think. I mean, there's many different ways that one can farm. Obviously, like I said, there's so much that I'm learning. Scrolling through, social media and stuff, I tend to also come across these reels of the people doing unique things with farming, and I'm always intrigued by it. And so one of the things, when you said with fish, I remember seeing things like that, but not understanding what I was seeing. But this is a common thing, I'm assuming, yeah?
Well, it's interesting. Again, like when you go down a sort of a YouTube hole,
right.
It seems like everybody's about this. And that almost dissuaded me years ago from continuing to learn and maybe even, try and make a name for myself or try and actually make these systems and use them. But really, it's still quite new of an industry, at least aquaponics is, although it's been around for 20 years. Just last month, I went to the National Aquaponics Conference in New Mexico, and that was awesome. And I learned so much from the way people were using aquaponics, whether it was, large-scale farming or a community geared farming, urban farming. There people were doing so many different things, like microbiologists down in Florida and Puerto Rico. It was really, really cool. But what I did notice was that it was still so new. Regulation is still so fluid that there's a lot of room for innovation. And that's where I sit, and that's where I love to sit, in the place of innovation.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking things up and wondering how the heck to figure stuff out, half the time no one's ever done it before, so I just have to figure it out.
Right.
But, more people are doing it these days, so there is quite a community of people sharing information, which is great.
That's pretty cool. I remember when I used to work at FedEx Freight, and I would work on Saturdays and drive home on 283. I'd listen to NPR a lot, and Radio Lab would always be on. And I was listening to a story they were talking about water and how there's the whole, and I don't know the name of it, but there's a whole system underneath the ground of how these plants and trees move water, share water, push water to one another. And it blew my mind. And I remember coming home and telling my wife, I was like, do you know what's going on out here? And so I guess why I bring that up, because when I'm listening to you talk about that, it's like there's a whole world of that nobody really, or a lot of people like myself, don't know about. Mm-hmm. So how, and this ties into my next question, really, with bringing the inner city experience and farming and these two vast different worlds. How do we get people hip to the benefits of what farming can do to, for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, that's a great question. And one that I think needs to be discussed in every room, right? Particularly in schools and communities altogether, really. First of all, how do we get them connected? Well, there are examples that already exist. Community gardens are a really great way on the neighborhood scale to get people at least seeing, if there's space and if there's somebody to take care of it, you can see and witness what being able to grow food just around the corner looks like, and what that can do to benefit a community, particularly if there is any kind of market involved. Now, also, when I was at the Boys and Girls Club, we, were sort of backed up to Linear Park there. There was a sunflower garden there, and I was like, that's pretty and all.
Yeah.
but let's try food, right? Let's try that. So, I ran it by a couple of people and no one really knew who or what. And so, enough people said, yeah, just do it. So I just did it. And it was great. I remember digging in those initial stairs with my, just my shovel from my house. I lived across the street. But one of the craziest things was that, some of the boys that were in the club were there in the park playing basketball. I said, guys, come up and help me dig this garden here. So we're digging, we're planting stuff, we're laying burlap bags and cardboard and mulching. And they're like, Miss, look, there's a worm. And I said, pick it up. And they said, no, Miss, I will not. And I said, boys, please. Well, I didn't say it as nicely, but I said, pick up that worm, get your hands in the dirt, see what it feels like. Know that there's so much going on underneath there. Just like you said, when you found about water, you were just like, whoa, I got to tell somebody because this is wild.
Yeah.
When you look underneath the surface, there's so much action there. And just to even begin to think about it can open up so many doors. So getting it and getting the kids doing it, getting the kids learning about it, and then getting the kids to eat it. They, once the summer was in full effect and we had a harvest, we had tomatoes, we had basil, we had some berries, and we had pizza days on Fridays. We ordered a particular local brand of pretty bad pizza. Right? That shall not go. We're not going to. So, I said, all right, what are we going to do here? Because I'm not just going to make salads and they're not just going to eat salads, right? This was a little while ago before kids were down with salad. And so, so I said, let's put that tomato on the pizza. And, the first boy was brave. And then they started to dare each other. You won't do it. You won't do it. Finally, somebody did it. And they were like, wow, that's not how I thought a tomato tasted. Because when they get their McDonald's burger, it just tastes like a smushy sort of gross mess.
Yeah.
But when you eat a tomato that you literally put the seed in the ground and watched grow and from seedling to fruit, and then you slice it and eat it, there's literally no better flavor. None. And so I think that's what the boys experienced then. And like I said, at that point, they were daring each other just so they could eat it,
Right.
And then I said, hey, try this basil on there. And I said, hey, these berries are sweet. Let's eat them for dessert, And it started to snowball. It was the snowball effect where more and more kids then wanted to help in the garden. But we really just didn't have the time or staff. So that's the other part is support.
Yes.
Support for these types of programs, resources for these types of programs. They do exist. And now that I'm on this side of, administering and being an administratrix of the farming, sort of urban farming industry here, or at least as a nonprofit, trying to get these grants is difficult. So I can see why and how it is why it's not the first priority for maybe some schools and some other youth organizations. But I really think in order to create the future that we want to create, that we see for our kids, where they're healthy, where their stomachs are working great, so their minds are working great, where there's not so much ADHD, which is, a lot of medical associates say that starts in the gut, in the gut health.
Right.
When we have entire communities that can pay attention, that aren't stressed because they're hurting or stressed and it comes out of their skin as psoriasis. When we have entire communities that are well, based on the National Wellness Institute's 6 pillars of wellness, which are pretty broad, but they include, spiritual, physical, social, intellectual, all these things, that makes a well community. And all of those things can be sort of greeted or initiated through working in a garden.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is like so mind-blowingly awesome about having gotten to this work, is because we can create, or we can help to create, we can engender, movement towards holistic wellness just through these simple activities. Getting your hands in the dirt, getting other people to put their hands in the dirt, and you put your hands in the dirt together.
Yeah.
The things that you talk about when your hands are in the dirt together and you say, man, I had a really stressful week and this is just so calming, and the birds and the water sounds. And, it creates so much more than just the food that you put on your plate.
Sure. It's a whole experience.
Absolutely.
All the way around. I'm trying to think back here because I do a little bit of research with my interviews. I try to keep things organic, but I'm trying to think back to, there was a post a while back, a pretty lengthy post of yours. You had an experience. It was pretty disheartening. Can you share with me? Because I'm tying this into when you just mentioned, we were just kind of talking about the politics of this whole thing when it comes to support.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you share that?
Yeah. So, see, what happened was, so I knew that we were able to grow a lot of food, and that's the whole point of Deca, is to be able to demonstrate that we can grow a lot of food in a small space.
Yeah.
And if we can do that in each quadrant in the city, and then work with the city to distribute the food, we could effectively eliminate food insecurity in the city, or at least nutrient deficiency.
Sure.
And so I had started on that plan. I'd talked to a few folks. I'd talked to the mayor. I talked to some LGH folks, identifying locations in the city where this could occur. And they said, Hawa, that sounds great. You have big ideas, but let's actually just start with a building. And so we had been talking about the old concession stand down at the bottom of Culleton Park, the old Water Street Park.
Okay.
And so, we were working together to create that as a sort of food access point where we could do our pay what you can market model.
Right.
And also create some programming for younger or youth or any sort of burgeoning entrepreneur to create an incubator kitchen as well. And so I don't want to get too much into the politics, but you are asking me that. So I'm just going to be frank about it.
Yeah, please.
Working with a bureaucracy, the city, is difficult.
Yeah.
Everybody has got a job. I understand. Sure. I'm not very good with returning emails and messages either. Everybody's got their thing. But so persistence was key to making it happen, and getting cheerleaders behind me who were also involved in the city to help my messages get through, to help spur action in the direction that we needed to go, which included emails to Public Works, to Department of Neighborhood Engagement, and more. Let's see. I'd also taken the Neighborhood Leadership Academy program. And so I was learning how the city worked, learning how these departments worked, learning the ins and outs of the bureaucracy, while also trying to grow the business.
Wow.
And about a week before we were supposed to hand over the keys, the city decided that they couldn't actually go through with the agreement, which was a huge bummer.
Yeah.
huge bummer. You know, I had bought equipment at auction, so there wasn't really the opportunity to return it.
Right.
And yeah, I had been making promises to community members saying, yeah, I'm about to get the space. Like, this is what we're doing. And also just, you know, the personal pressure that I felt to continue the thing that we're doing and actually show up for people, because that's what I say I'm
Right.
going to do.
Right.
You know, integrity is huge for me. So the fact that we really hadn't been doing anything was really, or that at least that's what it looked like from the outside, was so hard for me to swallow. So I really had to work hard to try and get that deal to happen. And then when it didn't happen, I knew it was necessary to tell the public about it. I'm not one to whine on the internet, but like,
Well, no,
I
didn't feel
really
like you
had
were,
to
though.
share that
Yeah.
because there's so much work that had gone 8 months of working with different departments in the city structure. But the key, and I think this is again what the leadership in yoga training has taught me, was to really not take that as hard as I might have maybe without that.
Okay.
And so what it did teach me to do was pivot. And that pivot actually has been so meaningful and so much actually more in the direction that I intend for Deca in the first place. So
wow.
It actually worked out beautifully. And that pivot was to really just recognize truly that I can't do it on my own. And so it became time to find board members, to find department heads, to really connect with the community in a more meaningful way. So finding people who are doing similar things, finding people whose missions align, finding smaller organizations who, are really dedicated to serving their community, which is just like, you know, people going out of their way to do something that they think might help, you know?
Right.
Really, when you break it down, it's like, it's not crazy. It's just people who want to do some stuff.
Yeah.
And so giving them the support of what I've been through, what I've learned, since I'm a nerd, like it's a lot. So now that I'm learning how to like run a nonprofit, come on in, let's learn together, you know?
Yeah.
There are so many resources out there now that I'm taking advantage of that I get to share with them now. And so they're learning. We just got accepted to the Parish Resource Center's grant writing cohort. And that was an application-based process. So I'm excited about that.
Okay.
And so
Congratulations.
like 3 of my team now will be able to take this course and learn grant writing too. So that's just so exciting for me. And
Well, that's
really
awesome.
the other part of Deca is creating leadership. You know, what I've learned, I can pass down, and we can be a self-replicating machine.
A lot of the stories that I've heard, including my own, is when you said pivot. It always seems to be the pivot comes when you don't want it to come, because
Otherwise, it'd just be walking.
right. but it's almost like, no, I don't want to pivot. And especially in your case, you were right there. So pivoting kind of brought you into a place where you realize, oh, wait a minute, I can make this happen. You're leveling up. You mentioned that the leadership program, while you were in the leadership program, you were getting hip to how things run. How was that dynamic? Were you starting to realize some things at that time? Like, oh, I see how things are working and I'm actively doing this also. Something ain't right. The math ain't mathin', or did it blindside you later on?
Well, I think we all have just sort of this general assumption that bureaucracy takes a long time. You know, red tape, everything.
Red tape, right.
It's like, blah, 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 time. And I definitely saw that to be true. But I also saw the people. I saw the real faces there doing the work. going into the offices and actually seeing people, filling out forms or doing whatever they have to be doing to make the city run. So, I was hesitant in telling that story because I realize it is just people doing their job. But they have to deal sometimes with such antiquated structures and rules. If you want to change one thing, you have to pass the buck to 14 people before that can change. That's the inefficiency of a city as a business, but not the inefficiency of the city.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I can appreciate that, actually. And that goes back to, like, I kind of equate that with when you look at your parents and you say you're just people. People are doing their jobs, and it sucks that things got to go the way that they got to go. But you were able to pivot. So, if somebody were to come up to you and they're entering this world that you're in, right? For example, and they say, Hawa, I see you pivoting, and I see how do you maintain? That goes back to my earlier question, like the will. Like, how do you are you? You said you're a Capricorn, so you're going to get it done. You're not giving up. Are you able to maintain a steadfast approach to things that you do in your everyday life?
I think that's something I've been able to cultivate. That's not something that I was born with, although I think I have a tendency towards that anyway because of the way I was raised, my family structure. Traditional Africans tend to be a little like my father's family is all in the military. Okay. My mother's family is all in the government. Like it's like this is how we are. Like a little bit like robots. But it's okay. So though, I think the one thing I'd say is that when I see a barrier, and of course, this isn't all the time, but for the most part, when I see a barrier, it's not the thing in my way. Let me back that up a little bit. There was a documentary about an artist who does graphic novels, and forgive me, I don't remember his name right now, but his drawings are so detailed. The underside and the smoke or the exhaust of a spaceship. Like how the heck do you even know how to draw that? And he would say, in my mind, I hold it in the space of my mind, and I'm able to see it in 3 dimensions or all dimensions, right? So I was that idea and the way they illustrated it really blew my mind. To be able to hold something in your mind and see it from every aspect. And so when you do that, not only are you seeing the thing for what it is, but you're also able to see every way to it, right? So, imagine like a potato filled with toothpicks or something like that, right? Yeah. That's a pretty good visual. So when like one toothpick comes out or one toothpick breaks or there's a barrier somehow, like I've got 1,000 other toothpicks to choose from to get to my goal. And that is a practice, I think, not something I was born with, something I learned to do. So that, there's always another way. I can figure it out.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Literally, right before you showed up, I experienced that here while setting up. I typically have my lights colored up top, and smart guy me got a new router yesterday and didn't think that my smart lights would have to connect with that. So here I am an hour before he showed up. But I had to pivot, and I was just like, I can make it work. I had a backup, and I knew it would work. And I've been trying to get myself to that also. Like you said, it's actually very difficult for me to not panic because I am, my OCD is like, I like things predictable. I know I like a routine. And when things pop off, which life that happens, it's kind of like, no, that's not part of the script. And so you have to learn
and that can feel like chaos,
1000%.
right?
Yeah.
But
You mentioned documentaries. Do you like watching documentaries?
I do, but I'm going to tell you something. I used to really like documentaries. I learned a lot from documentaries. I think the era for documentaries was like, 90s to like mid 2000s, right? But then after that, when I realized that documentary is just a style of filming, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's
like
really
a
just a
docuseries.
style of filming. It doesn't mean that what they're saying is true or unscripted, And so when I was like, oh, it's just another way to tell a story. I sort of stopped watching documentaries a little bit. I watch with a little bit more trepidation.
Okay. So you felt deceived by the documentary world.
Yup. The more you know, boo.
Yeah, well, I feel like, I guess, it makes sense if you're invested in something for educational purposes, and like I like watching them for that fact. But you're right. Now that you say that, I never really thought about that. And it's like the whole, like, Netflix really just has a crap ton of these docuseries where it's just like, it's addictive, but it's just like, by this point, are we really watching something that's documented, or are we watching a story being told in a different way? So I can appreciate that. I was wondering because the nerd in me, like, I love watching documentaries. I love education in different ways. Like I mentioned, Radio Lab. I like listening to these different types of things just to pique my interest of things that I never knew, because I'm always looking to, like, I don't know, like, fill this endless void of knowledge.
Fill the space.
Yeah.
But also, I'd say
at this moment, you hear bathwater running upstairs, completely unexpected, but I do record my podcast in my house. It is what it is. My apologies.
I feel the space, but also see how it connects. See how it connects to what you already know, and maybe it's like it's not as long of a bread trail when you can connect it to something you know. And I think what's great for that is YouTube, actually.
Yes.
So I've moved from watching documentaries to University of YouTube.
Okay.
And so, like, I don't know what other people look at on YouTube, but all mine is like farmers, aquaponic people, people doing like, because of the algorithm, thank you, YouTube or Meta or whoever, right? Whoever's watching and listening.
Right.
The suggestions now are including Korean farming method. It's called Korean natural farming, which now I'm learning how to make fertilizer for literally free using weeds. And it's like the most powerful and effective pesticides and all this stuff. And I'm like, thank you, YouTube, because now not only have you empowered me to be a better farmer, you've also empowered my ingenuity to maybe even make a new product to sell, to raise money for the nonprofit. So yeah, YouTube University is where it's at. Also, astrologers.
Astrologists?
Yeah.
So you're into astrology?
So much.
Get out.
No.
Well, talk to me about this then. I don't get in. I shouldn't say I don't get into it. I enjoy it. I just don't know. I don't follow it enough to. So, what is it about astrology that piques your interest?
Well, I'll say this. For anybody, there's a lot of naysayers out there, and so I'm not really talking to you. But I'll say this.
Right.
You can hear this too if you want. Astrology doesn't mean the stars are doing things to us. Because Mercury is retrograde, you are being affected somehow. It's not how it works.
Gotcha.
Right? So the idea, or at least what I get out of it, a little bit of both, the idea is a framework through which to see the world. some of the more ancient philosophy of as above, so below. So, the ancient peoples, ancient Greeks and whatnot, assigned values to these stars. Like the red one is called Mars, and it represents, aggression or slicing or movement. And, we assigned all these other values to the stars in the sky. And so when they do their dance, and Venus and Mars meet, Venus, planet of love, it's like, well, those planets are meeting in a particular way. Maybe it's a way that is like, has some dissonance, or maybe it's a way that's like a trine that's really nice. And so how those things are doing their thing maybe can inform how we do our thing. Right. And so, yeah, when the stars are doing their dance, we can do our dance as well. And it is a way to inform your movement through this life, as opposed to telling you what's going to happen, or telling you what's happening to you.
Sure. Fair enough. I can appreciate that. While you were speaking, I was thinking about how, like, what the galaxy is made up of is what we are made up of, as far as the atoms and the protons and all, neutrons and all that.
For sure.
And I'm not too savvy with it, but I know a little bit about that. So I kind of tie that into like what you were saying is the when it comes to farming and it comes to like getting your hands into the ground and the dirt, and everything is connected one way or another. Are you hip, or not that are you hip, forgive me, but are you keeping all of that in mind as well while you are actively farming? Is there more to that than just the physical aspect of I'm farming and I'm planting and digging, and is there a lot more for you going on?
Look, so like literally everything's connected, right?
Yes.
But I'll say it this way. This is what I mean. For me, in my life, I've been able to connect through Deca my love of yoga, my love of nature, and my sort of unhidden or revealed love to share my knowledge, right? And so when I'm doing anything in any of those realms, like it's affecting everything else, right? In the most positive way, or at least furthering the whole idea of how I want to be in this world and what I want to do. Okay. And so when I'm farming, like, is astrology connected? There are some people who actually farm by astrology. That's not my bag per se.
Okay.
But how one way that they intersect often is, so this is one way how I knew I was doing good, like I was on the right track. I think that's another thing astrology does for me too, is if sort of a check-in, if I'm on the right track, right?
Gotcha.
So I won't get too specific, but a lot of my astrology, my transit astrology right now says the focus is community, network. These are all 11th house, 10th house, and 10th and 11th house things. Community, network, business, sharing, service, a lot of Virgo stuff. I have a stellium in Virgo for anybody who knows about that.
Okay.
So, yeah. And so, like, when I'm hearing the astrologers say these key words about what is happening in the sky, and the words attached to the planets and how they might affect me, they are in fact showing up as that. Like, so much, like I said, this recent pivot has been to refocus onto community and refocus into how my business shows up for community. And that is 100% where my life is going right now. Whether it was because I heard it or whether it was because I'm doing it, doesn't really matter. It's just what's happening.
Yeah. It's almost like I think a lot about frequency and the energy that we resonate on. And it's almost like when you're saying things and you're putting things into existence, if you're feeling a certain way and you're actively trying to do something, but what you're feeling ain't vibing with it, I feel like that could do more harm than good.
Absolutely.
With I would think anyway. And so I try to have like, or try to do little like routines to kind of keep me from falling out of pocket in that regard. Like, for example, I actually did it today. I was having a really bad day at work, and I'm trying to keep my mind clear of negative thinking and distorted thought. And so a buddy of mine told me, he goes, every time I feel like I got something bad inside me, I just actively grab it and throw it. And you just got to grab it and throw it away. And I never did it. I remember hearing it and being like, that's actually pretty interesting. It makes sense. I never did it until today.
Yeah.
I was about to walk back in. I actually went outside, took a breather. I was watching the trees, kind of, changing color. And then when it was quiet, it's just kind of quiet. And I'm like, let me go back inside. And before I walk back inside, I did that. And I bring that up because I really do believe like thoughts and words have power.
And ritual has power.
Yeah. And it's almost like, because if I actively do it, I'm putting my thoughts into a motion of positivity. This then will lead into something that will benefit me and others. And so, yeah, I just, for whatever reason, that popped into my mind as you were talking.
Oh, that's so good, though.
Yeah.
That's so much of it. That's everything, really. It's that aspect of mindfulness to be able to identify that something is going on inside that I don't like, and to be able to almost name it, or at least place it.
Yeah.
And whether in your mind, in your mind's eye, wherever it started, maybe you even felt it come up and out. And when you grabbed it, you knew how much of it was in your hand, and you knew almost where it fell or where it flew away in your own mind's eye.
Yep.
And just that action, just that play, that ritual, that experience, can do wonders. It is as if you literally took it out and now it's gone. And the brain wants to be right, so you make it right by doing the thing, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. I studied psychology too in college, and that is really the backbone to all of this too. Is I was a peer counselor for a long time in college, before college. And then, and it's also in my bloodline too, which is wild. We can talk about that later. But
when you say it's in your bloodline, you mean your ancestry?
Yeah.
You've got that information somehow?
Yep. My paternal grandfather was an imam, which is a Muslim like pastor.
Okay.
And was like the town sort of secret keeper, arbitrator, problem solver, everything. He was that for the village, a really real like community pillar. And I also found out that on my maternal side, my grandfather was a pastor as well in Ghana. So my father's side is from Liberia, my mother's side from Ghana. So my two grandfathers were these sort of service to community, connected to the divine, like individuals,
Sure.
The divine. And so, yeah, that sensibility definitely is something that I feel and can relate to after having learned about who they were.
Yeah. I'm assuming that you learned about your paternal grandfather later on as you were rekindling your relationship with your father.
Absolutely.
On your mother's side, you knew of him at an early age. Yes.
No. all of my grandparents had passed before I was born.
Okay.
And then my mother passed when I was 19. So
I'm sorry.
thank
19.
you. Yeah, that was a tough one
Yeah.
there. But yeah, we can go into that. Yeah. How much time you got?
I got all the time in the world.
But yeah, so I've had to learn about these positions, who my family was in my adulthood. But I really love that because I'm able to, like, it sinks in as an adult would process the information. And so I see who my family was in a much different light, really an informed light, because I didn't know anything before.
Right. I did, I guess there were a couple of videos I watched with you. I was trying to get some information on you, and I remember you did mention your mom. You mentioned you grew up in a single parent household. You mentioned something along the lines of that getting food or it came difficult for your mom. Your mom worked multiple jobs. Is that
Yeah,
okay.
yep.
But you were unaware at that time. You said it felt like you had what you needed.
Absolutely. Yeah, my mom, she definitely provided. But, there was an awareness that there wasn't a whole lot. And, if I had to, if I had a craving for something, and as a typical kid, it wasn't just like a no, it was like, who's going to pay for it? We, some of us had those types of parents. So, but yeah, she always provided, and she sent me to great schools. And so as an adult, I understand what that actually took to accomplish. So, I definitely appreciate her so much for that. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. Yeah. You think what kind of influence has she had in what you're doing now?
Everything. I mean, the resilience, 100%.
Yeah.
The poise and grace, definitely.
Yeah.
But and also, like I said, if we didn't have a hammer, we used a heel. Like that sort of resilience. The MacGyver. The like, we're gonna figure it out no matter what. It's gonna get done no matter what. That mentality is 100% from my mom.
She passed when you were 19 years old. Can you share? Are you okay with sharing?
Oh yeah, sure. So I was actually away at college then, and she had suffered a stroke back in Massachusetts, and the hospital induced a coma to stabilize her, but she wasn't able to come out of the coma. So that was really sad.
Yeah.
But that was probably really the beginning of it, because at that point I had to question literally everything. I had to question everything, and I had to make sense of it and continue. So how I created my world was one where I had, I was seeking connection, but also I had connection. So my mom, I knew, would always be connected to me, but also I felt extremely alone, not having my father there as well. So I was really alone in the world, off in college in Lancaster, PA, trying to do the thing. And, from a low financial class family. So, it was a tough one.
Well, that's a lot for anybody, but at 19 years old, you're still learning who you are.
Oh yeah. And then I had to rent a U-Haul and go down to Massachusetts and empty and sell our house. Like, I grew up pretty quick right then.
So you did that on your own?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. I did have, I call him my pseudo stepdad, but my mom's longtime partner, came back to help a little bit, but he had already, he's got another family and everything.
Yeah.
But he helped raise me, so very integral in my life, and I was so happy he was able to take time for me at that time. And actually, through his recovery, he, I guess, for a lack of a better word, paid reparations to me. And that was the beginning of Deca. Like, really, so many of these things are connected.
Yeah.
In 2020, he found me and said, Hawa, I love you. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. Here is some seed money. Thank you.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
So I really feel blessed because the timing couldn't have been any better.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, I can appreciate that. And like I said, dealing with the loss of a parent, my dad died unexpectedly. He had a stroke as well. He had a hemorrhagic stroke 2 days after Christmas. And it was almost like, I can only imagine as a 19-year-old, you're still trying to figure yourself out. You're in college. How was that going back? I mean, like I said, you have this steadfast mentality. We talked about being a Capricorn, but that came with time. Was this experience like the birth of being able to really keep your head on a swivel, but also stay focused?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was really, I think maybe the word that came to mind was compartmentalize.
Okay.
I really had to separate things and see them for what they were, instead of sort of experiencing life as this big, just like wash of stuff happening to me. I had to then think about bills. I had to think about, my car insurance. I had to think about all these things that I really had never thought about before. And it was overwhelming, really. Not having that, figure to take care of me and to take care of those things. I knew I would be fine. She made me that way.
Sure.
But, and I think really my mom, not that she prepared me for her death, but she prepared me for her death.
Sure.
Because I was as ready, I think, as any human could be. Of course, there was sadness and tears and
Sure.
and deep depression,
Yeah.
But I felt alone, but I never felt unable to handle it.
Gotcha. You're able to, considering where you are now, when you deal with life's funks and I say daily depression, and what I mean by that, it's nothing long standing. It comes and goes. You get it. The clouds will come.
Intimately knowledgeable. Of
Sure.
that. Yeah.
Because
I definitely I suffer from depression too. Like I'm not even gonna sit up here and be like, oh, I got it. I definitely don't got it.
No, yeah.
But after all this trying and working and refining and trying to understand myself and the way my mind works, now I'm able to sort of witness it before it becomes chaotic. Right. But it's still there.
But that's a perfect way to say it, is witnessing it is kind of like, instead of trying to be like, let me get rid of it, I need to get help. It's like, it's going to happen. I've accepted it, and I'm grateful that my wife, she knows when I'm in those moods. But it's almost like, well, how can I be progressive about this, and how can I snap myself out of it? I got to go through it, but I don't want to stay in it, where I feel like a long time ago, once upon a time in my life, I would stay in it.
Because it felt good there.
Yeah. Well, it felt good.
It was bad,
comfortable.
but it felt good.
Right. It was predictable. I knew. Oh man, it was bad.
Yeah, it feels good to just lay in bed all day and not want to get
cover
up
the windows so nobody would see inside.
Just eat your feelings. Totally. That is all good.
Yeah.
But also not really conducive to a long or healthy life, or even the life that I want to live.
Yeah. This is a very, very awesome conversation. I'm very, very grateful. To wrap this up, I typically would be like, well, let's talk about what your goal is for the next 5 to 10 years. But really what I'm trying to do now is pick your brain here. So, we kind of already alluded to this already. What can we do to get our arms around the idea of inner city youth getting hip to farming, because the reason why I bring up the inner city youth, and I'm guilty of this, is fast food, vending machines, everything's easy on the fly, but it's not good. And so when you hear making something like this accessible, the red tape and the politics that come with it push people away on both ends. It pushes people away from trying to make it happen. It pushes people away from who like, okay, well, I mean, if it's this difficult, I will just go over here and get this, that, and the third. So like, I know you've already alluded to it, but like what, I guess on a deeper level, like how can I switch my thinking? You know what I mean? Because I know it. That's another thing too, is like, it makes sense. I know it, and I'm still going to make bonehead decisions. So I guess really it's discipline. Yeah.
But not in the heart, right?
Right.
So I'll say this. I'm going to bring it full circle, right? So yeah, being depressed feels good. Sitting in a dark room, not doing anything feels good. Eating McDonald's also feels good. And then for me, the next day, I'm like instantly sad, right? I am sad for literally no reason. This is something I've learned to witness. I notice now that when I eat fast food, the next day I'm ornery, I'm like paranoid, I'm like all these things. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And, you know, over maybe even years of going through this and knowing, it took me to sort of do the Google research and figure out, you know, my belly doesn't work very good. My liver works in all these ways. So these are the things you need to eat so that your brain isn't doing crazy things. And that was like step one, right? Step one was get my thinking right by getting my food right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that connection is so huge, I think. And I think a big part of what the conversation around farming needs to be, urban farming particularly, when we talk about inner city youth, but really youth that are less likely to get a meal cooked with fresh ingredients that are nutrient dense, right? Okay. That's the difference. When you're in a rural situation, most likely you're having a home cooked meal, likely with fresh ingredients, or that have been preserved in a way that is maybe more fresh than like a canned something or a fast food something that's full of chemicals.
Right.
So once you start eating right, your mind works right. When your mind works right, you can focus on stuff. When you can focus on stuff, you can succeed in literally anything you want to do.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah, it makes. I'm happy I put it that way because it's the most vulnerable, easiest, or vulnerable, transparent way to say it. Where it's like it makes sense, and I'm actively doing it, and I'm like, man, why don't I just take the time to learn it, to embrace it? Because at the end of the day, when you said the next day I feel like this, I never thought of it that way, and I never even really put two and two together. But I'm sure that does have a lot to play into it. When you say gut health, everybody's gut health is different, yes or no? So what I could eat wouldn't affect me the next day that it may affect you. So how do we go about? Is it really trial and error and trying new things? And
it is. I mean, again, it sort of depends on the goals, right? My first and foremost goal was to not be so depressed all the time, because when I'm depressed, I'm not doing the things I want to be doing. So doing the things I want to be doing is like ultimate goal, right? So how do I start doing the things that I'm doing? Well, I can't do them if I'm depressed. Well, if I'm maybe I should eat a banana, right? And then I'll feel sort of energized in a way. And then maybe I'll do a thing that brings me closer to my goals. And so for anybody, it's not about like your particular issue, right? It could be like I have like low acid. So,
Yeah.
food doesn't do this and that. And then my hormones get weird because they're trying to deal with everything. So knowing what is happening to you, right, is first, and how that's different than what you want to be happening.
Yeah.
And I understand that takes a lot because, you could go down a WebMD hole, you could do all this and that. That actually, that takes some work to really understand in this day and age with the amount of money in your pocket, what is going on with your body.
Fair enough.
But if you can at least, find some sort of description, however broad, and be able to name it and then look it up. Somebody out there is dealing with something similar. There are so many schools of medicine that, say traditional Chinese medicine will describe things as hot or cool. So if you eat food that doesn't work well with your body and then you get angry because you have too much acid and it's firing you up inside, you might want to change your diet to like avocado or things that are cooler and mushy to soothe, and then your attitude gets soothed, right? And then you can go about your day being the way you want to be.
I think it's fair to say that if you're going to make a lifestyle change like this, you need to commit all around. It isn't so much like what I'm eating, but it's also like what I'm reading, what I'm thinking, what I'm eating, what I'm drinking,
Absolutely.
the people I'm surrounding myself with. Yeah.
And again, I'll add, I sort of gave a shout out to personal and career development classes, but maybe more specifically is like find some people that know about the thing.
Fair enough.
Find a mentor. Like that sort of day and age is gone where interns and like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like somebody who learns underneath somebody else as a trade.
No?
Yeah, sure. That's another way too. But that style of learning is lost. And I realized, not being able to finish college because I didn't have enough money, and noticing that like that style of learning didn't even really work for me. What did work for me was having one person to teach me everything, and I can absorb it like crazy. So I had a mentor for my art stuff. His name is Tim Rhoda, who really helped me through that and trying to understand the gallery world. I had a mentor for my philosophy stuff, and they taught, he was a plumber. I was also a plumber.
Okay.
And like, he taught me so much, there are these people in my life that have been so integral and who are open and willing to share the information that we have. And so again, sort of going out into the community, making it known what it is that you need, reaching out, finding people who know, learning about what's going on, either with you or with the particular subject that you're interested in, and then making moves towards it. It's the action part in the end.
Fair enough. You gotta be willing to make the move and make that step, the initial step. Mentoring, I agree, and that's something that I'm in my mid 40s now. I'm really getting hip to like, hey, if I don't know, let me hit up and chop it up with such and such.
Yeah, let me ask somebody.
Right, because there are people that are willing to be like, yeah, let's talk about it. Let me what I love about reflecting, real quick before you wrap this up, is even throughout my life, like people that I've worked with. When you said he was a plumber and I was a plumber, like I've worked with people and I was getting hip to things through them that I didn't know I was getting hip to until as I look back and I go, oh yeah, there's a lot of things I know now because of the conversations that I've had, and I was actually paying attention and absorbing it. There are a lot of people out there that are willing to just share things. They won't gatekeep. And it's like, let's just find those people and stick to them because, the world is yours, really. Yeah.
And giving people the opportunity to share. I know I'm gonna like keep this going for a long time.
No, it's okay. No, I love it.
But what I mean is, so 2 years ago, we had a forum. Deca put on a forum, and all it was just connecting with people who were involved in either the yoga world, environmental, political world, food world, and food justice. There are people in this city doing amazing things, right? And all they need is a platform to just talk about it. Or at least they need more than that. They need resources. They need a seat at the table.
Sure.
They need more than that. But at least what we can do, and I think, and I'm so happy that you are able to do through your passion, is to give people a platform to be able to share, to give listeners and watchers a place and an opportunity to connect to something that may be not that far from what they're interested, but something new. And, you know, a short breadcrumb trail makes a really sweet connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great way to end this. I appreciate you, Hawa Lassanah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this. This is it. Was this an easy breezy conversation for you?
Heck yeah, this was awesome. Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was great.